Hello everyone and welcome to another tutorial video on Leküchner's fight book for the Langes Messer. In this one we'll be tackling the fourth Hauptstück, which is the Zwinger. Now as per usual we'll be tackling one particular situation in which this Hauptstück is very useful, and in this case it's breaking anything that a buffalo strikes. As the text says, the Zwinger breaks any strikes or cuts a buffalo makes. Now, our first order of business is then trying to identify what a buffalo really is, and traditionally it's of course seen as someone who makes just very hard cuts, and that kind of works. But someone making hard cuts from above already has a very good counter, and that's the Entrüstau. It gives you all you need for that kind of situation. So perhaps in this case the buffalo is someone who behaves just slightly different than just hitting very hard. And what I found is that the Zwinger is very useful against people who take a bit more of a squared up stance, almost as if they're boxing against you or doing bohort. So people who don't necessarily have one shoulder forward but is squared up, having the Messer on their shoulder rather than high up, and basically just flicking or launching it forward with a lot of power from that squared up body. In that case, doing an Entrüstau against that will probably overshoot their cut, therefore you get hit while you hit them. This is not good, obviously, we don't like doubles. So we want to do something slightly different than catching that cut when it is up high, so we need to tweak that Entrüstau a bit, and that's where the Zwinger comes in. So if you find that someone is squaring up to you, having the Messer on their shoulder and kind of like wanting to throw it forward, that's when you can prepare yourself to do a Zwinger. If we want to look at the mechanics of doing the Zwinger, it might actually be a useful idea to look at the etymology of the word. So a Zwinger is like some sort of a middle ground between two outer defensive walls, and it's that middle ground that an attacking army needs to traverse after they've captured the first wall before they can start attacking the second wall. Some sort of a killing ground almost. And if we go and look at Nuremberg, it's pretty neat. We can actually point out the Zwinger that Leküchner was probably referencing. It's over here. So with that in mind, the Zwinger needs to, I guess, create some sort of a defensive wall, a place where an attacking army can throw everything it has at and then still fail to take that wall. So we want to create a wall. So how do we do that? The nice thing about the Zwinger, and in my mind it's the same with the Schildhau with longsword, is that you basically come with an attack from your right side, but you make the attack, the cut, fully on your left side. And this is how we do it. So just as with the Entrüstau, we load up by basically putting our thumb on the flat of the Messer, pointing the point towards the ground as it were, and then pretty much having it make a full circle. However, where the Entrüstau goes into the horizontal plane, or perhaps if you're feeling a bit adventurous in the diagonal plane, the Zwinger needs to go in the vertical plane. And if you do that, if you perform that short edge cut in a vertical plane, you're basically closing off your left side because that's where you're cutting at, and that's where your Messer is providing this defensive wall of steel. That sounds way more metal than it actually is, but yes, you're creating a defensive wall on your left side by making this cut. And because you're doing this short edge cut this way, you do not only get to intercept cuts from above that go towards your head or neck, but also things that are aimed a bit lower at your arm or even your lower body. And that is a very neat feature of this Zwinger. So now that we know how to do it mechanically, let's look at how you can train this to be actually useful in fencing. So first off, I would suggest in this case just practicing the mechanics of the technique with a partner. So the first thing they do is they're just gonna approach you squared up and with the Messer on their shoulder or a little bit next to the head, and then just make cuts at you. And those cuts don't necessarily have to go towards your head or neck, but they can be a little bit lower at arm height as well. And what you want to do is perform that Zwinger, that cut that we just practiced in isolation, and use that to kind of catch that incoming cut from above that your buffle partner is making towards you. And when you do that, you either can hit them with the short edge, or if you do not really have the reach, you can then thrust forward to hit them with the point. Having done this for a bit, you're now comfortable with catching the cut there. So what you want to do next is go and practice what happens when your partner decides to then continue that cut with a changing through motion. So the second piece that we get from Leküchner's Hauptstück on the Zwinger is what happens when someone tries to do a changing through. Now, the changing through that your partner is going to do is not a very good one into long point. It's basically when they have made that cut, squared up as a boxer, they are going to be pulling it back and try and stab you from below. You can very easily counter this, and you do that by having extended your Zwinger. You notice that they want to go to the other side in whatever way, and you then extend your arm into long point. That gives you a couple of extra centimeters. It gives you a very nice thrust, and that basically tells your opponent, get away from me. Once you've become comfortable with not only cutting its finger into an attack, but as soon as you notice that someone wants to go to the other side, immediately stabbing them with long point, we can make it more dynamic. And that means that rather than just standing still as you're ready to receive their buffle strike, you are going to be moving around a bit, so as if you're actually fighting. And you can, of course, do that Zwinger now proactively, so you can do it for, meaning that if you see a nice opening and your opponent isn't ready to attack you, you just go for it, close off any line of attack that they might have with the Zwinger. And at the same time, if they do attack you, then you just perform the exercise as you've done it previously, just add a little bit more intensity. Once you get to this point, you're almost ready to take this into sparring, because right now you have got the mechanics down, you have made sure that you can do that against the partner, you know what to do to keep yourself safe afterwards, and now we're just upping the intensity to the point where we can take the confines of the exercise away and make this sparring. Right, so I hope you enjoyed this one. If you have any questions, let me know, and if not, then of course until the next one, which is going to be a really cool one as well. Cheers!